Hi everyone, Cindy Darnell here. Today's video, I'm going to teach you more about sex and the vagus nerve. But before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm a sex and relationship therapist who specializes in helping people stop struggling and start loving. I teach people just like you all around the world, online and in person, techniques, skills, and practices to help you feel more confident in your relationships, in your body, and in the bedroom. Today, we're going to be talking about sex and the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve is really helpful in helping you take more control of your pleasure. One of the biggest things that people seek help with in sex is overcoming the panic, shame, and discomfort they feel talking about sex, having sex, doing sex, being sexy. Sex is one of these things in our culture that is not taught, it's not valued, and it's not revered. And as a result of that, what can happen is people will struggle with so many aspects of sex that take them out of the moment, that make them feel uncomfortable, and that make them feel like they're not good at it. Today's video is going to show you more about how you can take control of that part of yourself that leaves, that freaks out, that gets abandoned during sex, so you can have more pleasure, so you can remain connected, and so you can have the best sex of your life. So let's start with a little bit of biology. When we experience panic in a situation, we often think of panic as being a very high emotional space that we can be, running around like a headless chicken. And for some people, that is how they experience panic. But for many of us, especially during sex, panic will show up in a different way. It might not be so dramatic, but it will certainly show up in the body. And we know this from trauma theory around the concept of fight, flight, freeze. So this is when our bodies either get super activated or they shut down and we react like we're under threat or under pressure. Now, this same sort of thing can happen during sex, and it can cause difficulties with connection, it can cause difficulties with pleasure, and it can cause difficulties with orgasm. So the autonomic nervous system, which regulates our breath, activates our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Combined, these systems regulate things like our breath, our perspiration, our ability to relax, our ability to get excited, our digestion, and so many other functions that we have that seem to happen automatically, things that we have no control over. So we've been led to think that sex is the most amazing and wonderful thing in the world. And it is for some people, some of the time. But for a lot of people, our bodies will respond with a stress response even if our mind feels calm. And we'll know that we're in a stress response if we're having trouble connecting our mind and our feelings, our emotions, and our bodies in sync at the same time. The stress response means that our heart rate increases and things like cortisol and adrenaline are pumped through our bodies at times when in a normal situation we would be running away from a threat. Except during sex, we don't actually want to run away. We want to remain present, but our body is behaving as if we're under attack, as if we're not safe. So things like our blood pressure might increase, our voice gets shaky, our breath increases, but not in a good way. We'll sweat, we'll panic, we maybe even lose the ability to speak. And so to balance this, we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to regulate and calm the body down, but not just the mind. But when you're in a state of stress and panic, the parasympathetic system, which is the system we need to have good sex, won't come online until the body realizes that it's safe to do so. And so this makes sense, except during sex when we want the parasympathetic system to intervene so we can enjoy ourselves. But when we're in overdrive with fight or flight or freeze, it reduces our ability to be able to enjoy and connect. And then the parasympathetic system remains unactivated, which means that our ability to enjoy pleasure, to have erections, to experience orgasms, and to really receive touch and feel connected is reduced or not existent at all. And all of this means less pleasure for everybody. So you know when your parasympathetic system is working because it gives you that sense of feeling relaxed, that you're feeling calm, that you're feeling in control, and most of all, you're able to feel pleasure. So what's interesting about this situation in a sex context is we need to be able to feel aroused and excited. So we do need to have blood moving through our bodies and to be alert and attentive, similar to how we would be in a sympathetic response. That's the nature of arousal. But simultaneously, we also need to be calm enough to be able to enjoy what we're doing. So we need that balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems to help sustain a pleasurable sexual connection. And so this is where sex can get really tricky because we might be applying regular relaxation techniques, things like meditation, that help us calm down in day-to-day activities, but they don't really help us too much in sex because we need to be alert and up, aroused and relaxed at the same time. So our bodies will naturally shift between activated and aroused, excited states and relaxed states pretty easily. But sometimes we can get stuck in an activated state, especially if we have experienced trauma, sexual shaming from religion or from our families, body image issues, relationship problems in the past, challenges around expressing our gender, or for most of us, simply growing up in a culture that's deeply uncomfortable with sex can have really negative and physical effects on our ability to enjoy sex and show up in erotic connections. For many of us, it may feel like we're constantly under attack, even if there's no actual physical threat present. But the good news is that we all have access to a way of changing how we respond between these states of arousal and relaxation, and we do this by tapping into our good friend, the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the autonomic nervous system, and it runs from the base of the skull through the brain all the way down our spine, right down, reaching into the pelvic floor. Now, the reason the vagus nerve is our friend in this context, and in many, many contexts, is twofold. The first part is that the vagus nerve is responsible for triggering the parasympathetic nervous system, so it's helpful for us to know about this. And the second thing about it that's fantastic is it operates bidirectionally. So that means it takes information from the brain down into the body, but it also carries information from the body back to the brain. And now this is especially good for us to know in a sex context and in all contexts, because it means that we can alter our state, not just by relying on thinking calm thoughts, but actually through doing different activities with our bodies can induce a calm state, allowing us to enjoy more pleasure. So first, we need to practice some of these techniques on our own, not in the presence of another person, because this reduces the pressure to perform, the pressure to feel like we have to have it all together. Practicing these activities by ourselves allows us the opportunity to know how they feel and land in our bodies. And when we've had an opportunity to do that, we can then start practicing it during partnered sex, or even teach it to our partners, and we can do them together as another way of connecting. So the first practice is to simply become aware of your heartbeat. You can feel your pulse up here in your neck, or maybe simply just by sitting and feeling it in your chest. You can also feel it in your wrist. Notice what happens to your heart rate when you simply start breathing in and out. That's the first practice, is just to breathe in and out. The second practice is to notice what's happening around your eyes and around your mouth. When we're experiencing stress or anxiety, our vision tends to get narrow, so we lose the ability to see what's going on out here, and we become very, very fixated, like tunnel vision, on just one thing. So something that we can do to help us extend and practice our ability to be present and activate the vagus nerve is to close and open our eyes. So literally closing tight like this and opening again can be a really useful thing to do, and to massage around the outside of the eyes. Another way is to open and close the mouth. So to open the mouth wide and really small, as if you were sucking on a straw. Activating these sphincter muscles allows us to trigger a response within the vagus nerve, sending messages to the brain that it's safe and we can relax. Practice that a few times. When you've practiced this by yourself, you can implement this during sex by softly gazing with your partner. Gazing eye to eye, often left eye to left eye, can be a really lovely practice, and deliberately softening the muscles in and around the eyes. So not squinting like this, but just allowing them to be closed and then opening into a relaxed state is another way that we can activate the vagus nerve to send information to the brain that we're safe. So far we've got breathing in and out, opening and closing the eyes, opening and closing the mouth, and softening the gaze, sharing that with a partner if it feels comfortable and appropriate to do so. Remember to also include becoming aware of the senses around you, what you can see out here, and almost what as far back as you can, to really get a sense of the room that you're in, to feel safer in your environment. The third practice for activating the vagus nerve is called the valsalva maneuver. And we do this by breathing in for 4, holding and bearing down with the pelvic floor as if you were going to go to the toilet, but don't follow through. Holding that down and then releasing and allowing the pelvic floor to come up. If you're interested in getting more information about the pelvic floor, the genitals, and all of the anatomy happening downstairs, I encourage you to check out my video series, The Atlas of Erotic Anatomy and Arousal, where you'll learn everything you need to know about what happens in the pelvis for sex and pleasure. So engaging in this valsalva maneuver, breathing in, holding, bearing down, and then releasing, allows our body to relax, sending again messages to the brain that it's safe enough to relax. Now, there is a little bit of caution with this one, especially if you experience high blood pressure. Be careful with strong breathing practices, and perhaps check with a doctor first before you start engaging in practices like this. While this is a very powerful practice, it can make you a little dizzy. So allow a little gap in between of just regular breathing before you do it again. This practice and loosening the muscles of the pelvic floor can also be especially helpful for people who struggle with erections, for people who struggle with orgasms, and for people who struggle with painful penetration, whether vaginal or anal. The final practice for helping increase our vagal tone is to simply yawn. So allowing the mouth to open and the back palate to reach up, taking a breath, also activates the vagus nerve. Similarly, doing this with a partner, our bodies automatically begin to co-regulate. That means they start to get in sync with each other, which is a beautiful quality to have, especially if you're having an intimate encounter with someone and you really want to tune into them. Being able to yawn together just a couple of times is a way of your bodies syncing together without you really having to try. Of course, yawning in front of somebody in many cultures is considered the height of rudeness. So this is again something that you would talk about perhaps before you do it and say, hey, I learned this cool thing, let's try it together. So your partner realizes that you're doing it because you want to connect with them, not because you think they're boring. Learning to manage your experiences of stress and trauma and how they affect sex help you take control of your pleasure. If you want to learn more about the offerings that I have, head on over to my website, cindydarnell.com, and you can check out my suite of online classes, pre-recorded, ready for you to take right now. I also have a podcast called The Erotic Philosopher, featuring sex experts from around the world. Check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for watching this video, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. See you next time.